studying law, and I went to law school, and I realized I absolutely hated the subject. By year three, I quit. I couldn't, halfway through year three, I couldn't do it anymore. Um,
And then you went to law, and then you realized that's absolutely not where I want to sit. No way.
Curiosity is something that you have and you need to have to be successful in a UX position. You need to be driven by curiosity. And if you don't have curiosity, you need to get curiosity, or you need to understand what steps do you need to take to become curious. It's a very in demand profession. If they feel anxiousness, it just means there's something not quite right with that job.
Much as you can. If you think I'm limited in this environment or this environment is toxic to me, just to highlight toxic to me, it doesn't mean it is toxic. It's not the right fit for me.
A tool is a tool. A skill is something that you will be able to carry with you.
Hi, Radu. Thank you so much for coming. Today, I want to discuss and get your tips on how to break into the UX industry and how to progress faster. So, yeah, where do we start? Tell me about how did you break into the career in UX?
Yeah, I guess, first of all, thank you for having me back. And then in terms of career, that, of course, I'll have to go back 15 years in the past and try and remember all the bits that might be interesting. So that'll be a very interesting exercise. However, I think one thing I would like to highlight is that no two careers or no two starting points are the same. Each and every person has their own story. And I think that's the beauty of just being an individual and being original as such is you don't really have a choice. No two journeys are the same. So my story started quite early when I did start a very creative kind of a childhood, and I was a kind of kid that would just draw on walls and on pretty much every surface, flat surface I could find. And that was my sign that, yeah, I do drawing, I do like painting, quite creative, also very introvert as well. So really believe right now that I was, as a kid, I was so shy that I simply did not want to go buy anything because that meant I had to interact with another person. So that was a bit worrying for my parents, but luckily I've managed to move over that somehow. So in terms of that, I did not pursue a creative kind of education as such. So I studied a lot of maths and physics in high school, so very focused on hard sciences and exact sciences. And then I moved into a career in law. So I was studying for about 3 years. I was studying law, and I went to law school, and I realized I absolutely hated the subject. By year three, I quit. I couldn't, halfway through year three, I couldn't do it anymore. And then I just went in to just find out what else is there. So I started studying design studies. And that was back in when DIT was a university in Dublin. Now it's called TU Dublin. So I've done that design studies, which covered quite a lot of design theory and different design applications, right? From
Mm.
transport design to engineering design, graphic design, and so on. Even interior design and landscape. So it was a very holistic design course, which was fantastic because I realized I like only some of them. And I
Mm.
decided I'll pursue a more kind of digital visual design career. And as I studied that and I realized that's what I want, I got an internship, which was absolutely amazing. It was probably the best thing that happened, right? And that kind of kickstarted my career as a designer, as a creative professional. So from there, I moved on through different companies of different sizes and different roles. I learned quite a lot. Each and every job was different. And for example, in some jobs, even though it was a visual design job, I was asked to learn how to design emails, and not just the
Mm.
design of the emails, but the actual code. So the HTML that was going in.
Mm.
So different companies have different ways and different views of the job title, right? So even if you're called something, that is
Mm.
just a job title. The business will have needs that you will have to fulfill or you'll have to add value to. So from that kind of visual design, once I got into a bit more kind of very digital focused, marketing focused roles, I realized that there's a lot more behind just the visuals, just the UI of a website. And then I decided I need to look into it. So that's where I went back to studies and I studied specifically UX. I actually went back to an Irish university, IADT. And I studied UX, and they had a very nice certificate course for UX. But then, because it was so interesting, I also got the opportunity to do the master's for that. So I've done a master project that was pretty much the whole course was 3 years. And I got my master's in UX and UX research more specifically. And from there on, I just started applying UX and UX principles for pretty much every job I was in. So
Yeah.
my whole view of what I'm doing changed. And one thing to note here is that the job title did not necessarily describe my position as a UX designer or product designer. But however, that did not hold me back from applying principles and going through the UX process. So that's why I'm saying it's probably very unique because you could ask 10 people and you will get 10 different answers in terms of this. But that's in summary, that's my journey. And right now, what I do, I work for an agency in Dublin, and I am a UX strategist, which means I look specifically at how can UX drive value in different contexts, in different industries, and for different needs as such. So I'll look at the big picture and decide what is the UX roadmap and how a company or some business might need to approach different things to get to the point where they can deliver value or enhance value and improve the bottom line. So that's a very short, quick tour of my career, if you like, so far.
I would say that would be the twilight of your career so far. A nice one. So now that's really interesting the way you said, like, it was you're very creative, but something like as we all go through teenage stuff and young adults, we choose what's available like math, physics, like peer pressure or different situations. And then you went to law and then you realize that's absolutely not where I want to sit. No way. And next you followed your creative path, like you went back to your inner child or what they were called, and you listened to it, and you didn't like, even though you followed your creative side, you didn't straight break into UX. You don't even know, I'm assuming, there is a thing called UX. You tried go to creative, you again went back to college, that's a very brave move. Went back to college, studied design theory, and then you figured out, you took a 360 design course. Then you figured out, and after you started working, generally, I think it's like a graphic designer, visual designer, not like a UX part, but mostly like visuals and those stuff you worked on, like graphic design and those part. And then you stumbled, I think it's accidentally on UX. And then you went back, you did masters, you went back to college, further education. Then you started applying for UX roles. So I want to ask you a question like, when you decided, how did you discover there is a part called UX?
Yeah, very good question. So I don't think, I think actually is like you mentioned there. I realized that there's something behind design. Their design has a special power that might be untapped, or it might be that nobody's really tapping into it because they don't really know what that is. So I realized there's more to design than just aesthetics, just the layout, just the visual or graphic design of elements. And I couldn't really define it or describe it. I just felt like there's more to it. And then when I started looking, I realized that there's something, and there's a discipline. There's a whole discipline called product design or UX design. And there's so much more to it, right? And so it's exactly like you said. You don't really realize, or I didn't realize back then, that there was something else, and I got curious. And that's probably the key point here, is that curiosity is something that you have and you need to have to be successful in a UX position. You need to be driven by curiosity. And if you don't have curiosity, you need to get curiosity, or you need to understand what steps do you need to take to become curious. And that will lead you to the next thing and the next thing, push things to study or to research. And I think right now, UX is probably a bit better understood and it's more defined, even though I still see businesses, I still see people, graduate students, and even people in the industry struggling a bit to describe UX or to just pinpoint exactly what this is, right? I wouldn't say that it's an easy concept. For sure, it's not, because it takes years to master. And even once you get into it and you understand more, you just feel like you're only scratching the surface. And there's so much more behind it, right? As soon as you get into, and the example here would be, once you get in and understand a bit what happens in the background, what drives a successful design or website or app or anything really that has that digital layer on top, you realize that you need to understand psychology, you need to understand cyber psychology, so things that apply specifically to on screen. You need to understand so many other things, and you get into heuristics and you get into biases, and there's so many layers to it, right? And the more you look into it, it becomes more complex. And I'm saying that with absolute excitement because it's so nice to keep peeling away the layers and discover there's more and more. And that's something that's very exciting, and it keeps me interested and keeps me plugged in and curious as well.
Correct me if I said it right. It's like a civil engineering of design is UX, like basically. And one of the thing is you have to be as curious as a cat to feel like everything and keep discovering. Did I say that
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I think they do say that curiosity killed the cat, but
Kill the
yeah,
cat.
I don't know.
At first, it doesn't kill it design.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so that's very interesting. So curiosity is one of the skill. Like it's an intrinsic skill, I would say. It's not like extrinsic. But when you first got the UX job, you had a different foundations, right? You're to be like a UX, you have to think about the logic behind why am I designing, what problem I'm solving. I think different, like you had a different preparations, mathematical, physics, which prepared you very structured and practical, whereas law prepared you with critical thinking, like, oh, this can go wrong, this is how I do. But for you to get actual first UX job after getting through the college, because so many people go through the college, but there were, what is few specific skills that got you job back in those days when UX is not well known?
Yeah, I think that pretty much everything that if I look back at, my experience so far, I think that pretty much everything I learned served me quite well on this journey and even to this day. And I know there's this perception that it's very hard to get into UX right now. And I somehow, to some extent, find it to be quite the opposite because UX is a very in demand profession right now. And there's so many companies offering UX roles. And they're very specific when they say we want a UX designer. It's actually something to do with UX. Maybe a few years ago, they did say UX, but they meant something else. They probably meant more
Mm.
visual stuff or maybe less research. So you didn't really have to have that angle. But I remember when I was transitioning from my kind of visual job, right? One of the things I was trying to do constantly was to find angles or UX angles that I could apply in my current role as a visual designer. So I was trying to see things through a different perspective and always try and apply that to the designs, be it just marketing projects or landing page optimization or even emails, right? Even just plain emails, like marketing emails. And what I try to do, I try to create and build my case studies so that I have something to show that I approach things with slightly different view or more in-depth view. And I found it really hard. And I interviewed for a very long time for UX specific positions within my transition. And I found it very hard. And I had cases where the interview or the hiring manager was telling me in the interview that I should stick to what I do and I should just leave this to other people. That you meet different people in different places, and I think one thing that really helped me was just grit, just the fact that I was so determined to get a UX specific job or a product specific job that I just decided no matter what, I'm not going to quit. I'm just going to keep at it, and I'm going to use the UX process to keep me guided towards working towards my goal. And what I've done, I've applied that to the feedback loop. I'll present a case study, I'll get feedback. If the feedback was stay where you are, you're safe, it was just a sign that my case study was not strong enough. So I would go and redo it and or completely redo it from scratch or just do another one, use a different project or try and do something else. As part of that, I was trying to find smaller jobs, helping different companies, or even just pro bono projects where I will just get to experience the demands of a real business and see how I can help them. So I've done that, and luckily I did manage to progress, and I did manage to find a specific role. But all I want to emphasize is that it was not easy. Transitioning from anything to anything is not easy. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. Nobody really looks at your credentials in terms of where did you study or what's your degree saying, I don't think is relevant. Businesses nowadays, they just want to get the feel almost instantly that you're the right person for the job and you have the right skills. So that was it. There's no secret. It's just you have to keep trying through hundreds of applications until you understand what works and what doesn't, and you get to a point where you refined your portfolio and your CV enough that somebody will actually see you and say, yes, you're the right person for this.
So basically, my question would be most of the people say, I applied for hundreds of jobs. I didn't even get an interview. They think, oh, you applied 50, you got one interview, then you're doing great. Something you're doing right. But I'm applying for 100, I don't get an interview. So I think that must be a technical thing. From what you said, I think you have a really strong visual skills. You sell them, so that's why at least you got the interviews. On the interviews, you try to prove the UX skill. I can apply whole UX process from research. Is very logical why I design particular way. From what you said, from what I understood is, first of all, you have to be prepared, meaning you have to have an excellent visual skills because you can do a great UX. If you can't sell visually, then there's no way you're going to get even an interview. Nobody's going to take a look. So once they take a look, like visual is like a hook, get them hooked. Next, to keep them for the retention is like UX process, how well you explain the story. Keep continuing applying, but also apply the UX to your whole interview process too. So the main technical skills, in order to first at least get the interviews, and two parts we can say to get into the interviews. First thing, you have to have a really good visual skills and basic understanding of UX if you're very big transitioning. And second thing, to actually get a titled UX role, you have to have grit. That's it. Grit and curiosity. Keep applying until you get one. Yeah. So how long did it take you? You said like it was a very long interview process to get into UX. How long did it take you to get into the UX?
It's hard to say, but if I think just in terms of the actual process of getting a job, so the first design job after I finished my internship. So the internship started as a 1 month internship, then it became a 3 month internship. And then I basically spent the next 9 months looking and applying for jobs. So that kind of gives you an idea of how long it can take once you graduate and how long you can expect. And maybe going back to the point that I was probably not a good UI designer. I was never very strong in visual, to get good enough to be able to, like you said, convey the message that I want to convey. So this is a lesson I learn to this day, and I keep coming back to it. How you package things and how you sell them is really important, because even though people should not judge a book by its covers, they do. And that's a thing that happens every single day. And I think you have to some extent get your visual skills to at least the basic level, where even if you don't know how to design perfectly, at least you're staying away from obvious mistakes like alignment issues, or you understand maybe font hierarchy, or you understand how to emphasize different things, how to keep them clean, how to avoid clutter, how to make things readable. The visual skill is indeed important. But let's just assume for a second that you want to apply for a pure UX research role, so user research.
Mhm.
You might not necessarily need to have visual skills. However, it will help if your portfolio is short and to the point and your decks are nice and clean and you can convey the message of your process, or what things do you, how do you analyze information, what tools do you use, what's your process. If you can do that in a nice, simple, and elegant way, you're probably going to stand out. Um, and of course, the more you approach that product design side of things, of course, the higher the expectation. So I'm afraid that even though you might be hoping or thinking that UI is or visual skills are not relevant, they're actually probably the one thing that will make you stand out and get job interviews. And I think that's true. And like you mentioned, I did have a basic enough level of understanding in visual design. So I could get to a point where I got the interviews and I got to that stage. But I felt like I'm just hitting a wall. I couldn't progress past that. And one thing that I probably struggled with quite a lot was the fact that I didn't really have an option to find a mentor. or find somebody in which I can confide and show them my portfolio or my case studies and get immediate feedback that's honest. And I think it took me a long time to discover things on my own. So getting visual, a good visual base in terms of how visual skills that you need to progress, and also getting a mentor. Those two things will probably accelerate your transition or just help you find that job a bit quicker. And of course, maybe we just need more mentors, not just one. Maybe you need five. But I think we live in a time where getting a mentor is actually not as hard. It's probably a lot easier than you think. So try and reach out and have very honest conversations with people and just take that feedback on board. And I think those two things will really help you accelerate your journey.
So, say someone after went through all this process got their first job as a graduate, or say someone just got junior position because there were not so many graduate roles. So, after getting a junior role, how do they work in that role? How do they plan their career from there? Because they can't sit down and expect someone else to mentor them. It's impossible. It would be like most of the time show and like show and no tell. I don't know how to phrase it. Most companies say, "Go, will train you," but it's not going to happen. If you're lucky, it would. But most of the time, business hired you to get their need done. It's not a school. So that's the point people keep missing, meaning you have to be prepared. How do you, in order to progress in your career as a junior, you got your job, and how do you prepare yourself to progress, and how do you set your foundation in the company?
Yeah. Once you start, so let's assume that you've managed to pass the hurdle of getting past the job interview and actually getting an offer or two.
Mm.
The reality is that once that happens, we can't really stop and say my short-term plan and my long-term plan is and map all the steps, because the reality is you can only see so much into the future. It's good to have a plan, it's good to have an idea of where you want to be in 5 years time, but I think you have to be ready to change that because technology and jobs in general just evolve at a very fast pace. The reality right now with that in mind is that you're not necessarily in charge of your career as much as you think you might be. And there's probably quite a few examples of people that just stumbled onto different companies and different jobs and they've managed to have a very specific career path just because of the mentorship they got in the company or the specific needs of the company, and they got trained and then they got to know something to a very advanced level and then they decided I'll keep going that way. So I don't think you can really predict your career as much as you might want to. So it really
Mm.
depends on the context, right? It's good to have an idea. It's good to pencil in a journey and say, in 5 years' time, I want to be this. But one thing I realize is that it really depends. And like every journey, you do not know where it will take you. You hope that you will advance and you hope that you will get interesting projects. And that's probably a better way to guide your career. Just look at what you're doing. Do I enjoy this? Does this make me happy? Do I feel satisfaction from this specific role? And if the answer is no, then it's probably time for you to make a change or course correct or make some adjustments. So I think having that and asking yourself every 3 months, having a reminder in your calendar, right? Almost like a recurring reminder where you ask this question: am I happy in this role? Right? And if the answer is maybe, you're okay. Maybe you need to make some small adjustments. But if the answer is no constantly, then it's time for a change. Either change roles or change company, or really just look at maybe the specifics. Maybe you're not doing the right thing in that field, in that
Mm.
sector, right? So maybe look at making some changes. And that's probably going to take you to a point where you will get 10, 15 years into the future and you'll be happy where first of all, you'll be happy with the journey, and you'll be in a happy place because you do the things that make you happy and keep you interested. And they basically just get you excited. And the vast majority of people, when they think, let's say it's a Sunday afternoon or evening, and when they think of Monday, if they feel anxiousness, it just means there's something not quite right with that job. Because if it makes you
Mhm.
anxious and you can't really think of waking up on Monday and going to work, you have to make some adjustments. And of course, this is not an easy thing to do, but you just have to be aware of it. And don't lie to yourself. Just be honest and then see what else can be done. Because the more experience you get, the kind of the easier for you it might be to change jobs or to find different roles or to find different challenges, right? Because at some point, maybe you have exhausted every single possibility within that current context.
So basically, you need to be three things to ask once you start as a junior, like what are the opportunities in my current role, like in how I can improve. Second thing is, as a UX designer, irrespective of the company, are you still satisfied at the first of the career? Do you think this is the right role? And if you progress a little bit to mid or something, you really enjoy the role. But then on the Monday check, it is, do I like the environment of working? Because sometimes some environments are really toxic. As you progress with your experience, oh, what's happening around me is not good. I need to change an environment. Even though you have a very good position. It's also, first of all, to get an experience as a UX skills. Two ways, like as you progress, you have to enjoy your life, your journey. At the same time, you have to enjoy the UX. Because this, if you're listening to this episode, meaning you already decided you enjoy UX, the main thing to progress is because your career is not as much as your control, as you mentioned, depending upon the opportunities. Always self check. Only thing you can try to do the best is change an environment and create your own opportunities as much as you can. If you think I'm limited in this environment or this environment is toxic to me, just to highlight toxic to me, it doesn't mean it is toxic. It's not the right fit for me. Or if you stayed there for a few years, you think, see, I seen enough. I don't think so this is the right company. Or I'm not enjoying, I'm dreading going on Monday, but I like doing UX. Time for you to then look somewhere else, start looking. But you can't control your next environment. As you said, your career is not as much as you control. But whole thing is to keep trying, applying curiosity. But you also mentioned another interesting point. You said in the current reality, the skill set, the technology is changing at a rapid rate. So you can't really craft. I've become expert in Figma in 5 years, then Figma is gone, some other new software kit. So how to set the right course in the skill set? How do you say, how do I invest in a skill set as you progress? I know it won't go away. Like I would get like a 100%, like 80% written on it. But how to choose, like how to make a right choice, which skill to concentrate that pays dividends to me as you progress.
In terms of skill, so you just mentioned we sometimes tend to confuse skill with tools. And I
Mhm.
think that's a very common mistake. So, skills are the kind of things that you learn. For example, you learn principles of visual design. Those will not change from tool to tool. A tool will only help you only as much as you know how to use it. So,
Mhm.
this applies to things like graphic design, visual design, web design, app design, and so on. So a tool is a tool. A skill is something that you will be able to carry with you. So good visual skills, understanding of how to do proper user research, principles of how to conduct an interview. Those are independent of tools. They're just some rules, some heuristics, some processes that you apply constantly to try and replicate good results. So I think that's very important to understand. I've seen myself working with Photoshop at the very beginning, and then moving on from Photoshop to design in Dreamweaver, and then moving on from that to Sketch. That was absolutely revolutionary. And then from Sketch to Figma, and exploring everything else in between, like Adobe XD and every single tool that was out there. And I think a really good, strong indication of the time is just to look at what do other professionals use. There's a reason why people use Figma so much these days, right? So if you're not sure what to do or what tool to gravitate towards, make sure you have a few conversations with people in the industry and ask them, what's your tool set? What's your tool stack? What things do you use for this type of thing? If you want to analyze user interviews, what do you use? And ask the community and see what kind of answers you get. And there will always be one or two tools at the very top, right? And focus on understanding how to use them. But also, you have to understand you can't jump in and use a tool without having the fundamentals, the principles, the good understanding of what that tool can help you with. A tool will enhance your skills. Is as simple as that. And we always come back to this point when we mention generative AI. Generative AI is a tool, it's another type of tool. You can jump in and you can ask it some basic questions and it will come back with some really generic answers. Or you can spend a bit of time crafting your prompt and making sure you tweak it until you get a really good answer that you can take from there and really evolve. And it can help you increase your productivity, create higher quality stuff, and so on, right? But at the end of the day, it is a tool, and we still need to understand how to use it and how to interact with it. So at this point, focus on skills will be with you. Tools might not. Tools will always change in time. From what we've seen so far, I wouldn't be surprised if next year or the year after we're going to have a new set of tools that we need to learn. And so this will be a constant. New tools will keep coming and will make our life better and faster and the results so much better and so much so to increase the quality. But skills will always be there. And you have to understand when you ask yourself, what skill do I need? What skill do I enjoy? And then see if you can gravitate towards skills, not tools.
So basically, how would I phrase it? The main thing you need to learn is the skill set, like the craft. You have to learn the craft, but it's like a stone mason. Like you have to know principles of how to do the sculpture, the mechanics and physics. But like the chisel and those that in design language are Figma and those stuff, those may change, those may become more sophisticated. But at the same time, as you progress, the main return on investment is your skills, the foundations and craft, but you also know how to make that craft into reality. That's where the tools come in. Because the tools keeps changing, always look at other designers. What is the most famous? What is the specific industry? In your industry, what is art? Some people use AutoCAD, depending on which industry is it. In your industry, are they using Figma, AutoCAD, or whatever? Be aware of it. Try to learn like the technicality and limitations of the tool and how much you can go further, how much the tool can help you with your craft. So, say someone, okay, let's take like a digital designer, like especially Figma. Someone progressed further, they know like how to set up complex design systems, they learn the basics or something. But how do they market themselves? Like they say, okay, I've been here for 4 years. I tried everything from research to design systems and those stuff. Now I want to be a UI designer, only UI in design systems, or someone only like design ops. Like it's not even UI much, but design ops, setting up design system, maintaining the system. So after 3, 4 years, if they're in continuous full-time role, after they tried everything, they got like a specific knowledge. So now they crafted their portfolio. How do they market themselves? To now, after a certain point, you have to be an expert, right? Like you still need to be a T-shaped designer, an expert. How do they market their specific skill? Hey, this is my specialty as you progress in your career.
Yeah, very good question. And also, you mentioned there in terms of the career progression or maybe more speciality, you mentioned the T shape. And the T shape designer or the T shape specialist is not the only way you can progress. You can be a generalist as well. You can be somebody that is almost like a broken comb. So you have different depths for different disciplines. And that's also okay. If your job or if companies look for T-shape and they need a specialist that also can cover very superficially everything else, that's okay. But it's definitely not the only shape available. And I think once we clarify that, the very interesting point is how do you market yourself? First of all, it depends on your environment. It depends on what type of company you're in because some bigger companies have career tracks. They have designer level one, designer level two, researcher level four, and so on. So they have different taxonomies or different career progression ladders. And each and one of them comes with a pay bump or a responsibility bump and the kind of things you need to hit on and you need to become good at specifically to advance to the next level. Some people can do
Mm.
it in 2 years, some people in five. So some really well organized companies, they have that kind of structure and it's a lot easier to understand how you can progress, right? It also keeps you engaged and you probably stay in that company longer. Some other companies might not be as structured, might not have a career path, and you might get to a point where you actually there's no place to go, right? But usually for UX designers, you have two very distinctive paths. One, you could become a principal, and two, you might become a manager. So if you are to just really simplify the career paths, principal would mean it means that you have absolutely mastered quite a few UX verticals. So you understand maybe research, you understand strategy, you understand workshops, and you're very good with also with prototyping or wireframing or UI design or design systems. So you at that level you're a principal. It means you people come to you and ask you questions. Everybody wants you to be part of the project. You just have that level of knowledge. However, you can also mentor people. You can mentor other designers. You can lead projects, but you're not managing people. People like other designers do not report into you. You're not in charge of their personal development, right? You're not managing them. This is where the role of a design manager comes in. You could be specifically UX design manager, you could be product design manager, or research design manager. And your role might be you're actually not going to be hands on. You're not going to do the work. You're not going to be the tactical. You're going to do the strategic work. And the strategic work might be to look after the team to make sure they're working on the right projects with the right skills at the right pace while hitting their budgets and deadlines and everything else. And that's the role of a manager. And those are the two tracks you need to be aware of overall, I think, in terms of promotion. And if you realize you're in a job where you can progress and it's really important to you to that you progress, maybe the answer is you need to go somewhere else and progress, get a more senior role. The one thing I'll mention there, and I think is very important for people, and it also I know this because it took me a while to get to the point of understanding, is job titles. Don't be fooled by job titles and never chase job titles, right? Because it's a fool's errand. You will end up chasing things because they sound exciting and they might not be. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
A job title's role is for the HR department or the payroll department to know how much they should pay you. And that's that. That's the role of a title, right? So be aware of that because I have seen companies just offering director level positions. So people called senior director UX designer. And when you look at the salary, might not reflect that, might still be quite low. So that's why I'm saying there is a difference between a job title and the actual job description or role. So you stay focused on what you do and don't worry too much about job titles. You can still call yourself whatever you think is the most representative for what you do. So if you think your role is of a product designer within a specific industry, then you're a product designer. Don't worry if the company decides you are, I don't know, called something else, right? It's not relevant. So that's why keep in mind when you do want to progress, do not chase job titles. And also, having a senior in front of your job title does not automatically make you senior. Senior is something that it's earned through years and years of practice and skill and just job kind of training, right? So that's why this is very important to mention.
So you mentioned a really good point. The titles mean nothing. Sometimes also at the point I just interpreted is based on the description, negotiate your salary for the next role, not based on the title, because title never does the justice. And you also mentioned title means nothing. You define yourself. If someone is junior, they been in the junior, say 1 year, they're super smart and they already know. But how do they know, hey, I'm ready for this role? And also the thing is, I personally believe in order to progress to the level, you don't need to have 10 years experience to get from mid to senior. If you're super smart, if you put in day and night work, balancing your life, of course, maybe in 3, 4, 5 years from mid to you can jump to senior or maybe lead if you're that smart and able to handle. So I'm thinking like most of the people, especially if they're staying in a small countries like Ireland, there are not many companies. Most of the companies are medium to small or startups, and most of them has maturity level 2 or 3 max X maturity until you're in an agency. And most of them don't really have proper career plans. Like How do someone know from a self-reflection point of view, hey, I think this is my skill set. I think I can do a bit more, get paid a bit more, look for another description, a bit to my level, which I practiced. How do they know I'm ready for a promotion?
Yeah, this varies, right? It does vary on the company. And I think this is a conversation that maybe you need to have on a regular basis with your direct manager, or depending on the structure, whoever is the person that you technically report into. In some cases, in startups, it might be the CEO. In larger companies, it might be a design lead, or it might be a design manager, or it might be somebody else within that, depending on the makeup of the team. Maybe it's the CPO, the chief product officer, right? Or it could be somebody else. So having regular conversations when you want to progress, having clear discussions where you go and you ask, if I want to progress to such and such level, what's expected of me? And have clear definitions of the steps you need to achieve and by when, right? So make sure you ask the questions and you get very specific answers, and then you just follow through, and that is your plan. That is how you prove that you've achieved the level and you've done the things that were planned or asked of you. And that's the conversation. That's how you need to provide examples of driving value or achieving results or exceeding results to be able to progress to the next level. So that's a thing that you really need to keep in mind in those conversations. And again, it varies because it depends on the company, the context, the company structure, and so on. And that's very important. So you can have that conversation and progress, or you can just look at other jobs that might be similar in to what you do and see how do they define the roles. What's the level of seniority? Again, that seniority level is really judged on based on your portfolio. So if you think you're a specific level, portfolio to somebody more senior and ask them honestly, what do they think? Where would they place you? And it's very important to be somebody senior because they have seen portfolios, they understand levels. They can look at your portfolio and straight away tell you, yeah, it looks like a junior portfolio, or it looks like a mid-level or a senior level or lead. So they will
Mm.
tell you straight away. And of course, don't ask just one person, ask three, ask five if you can. Show them your portfolio and ask them, if you knew nothing of me, where would you place this and what level? Give them the levels as well. So you're almost conducting market research, right? You're trying to see where would people place you.
Mm.
If you're really interested in quantifying and understanding on a more quantitative level, maybe create a quick survey, show some samples of your work, and ask people to say, what level would you place this on? And then get an average. So that will probably tell you if you're ready for the next level, or if you're more senior than you think you are, or if it's quite the opposite.
That's a great advice. So you mentioned one of the important part is to check with your manager. So I work in few companies where I was reporting to the product or like sometimes engineering directly. They don't have anything about design. They really don't know. They hired you at specific level, and if you stay there, you will be in that level forever. And how, in that context, how do a person assess? Apart from getting an external mentor, how do they assess, hey, where am I in my career? I'm not going to sit. I like money is one of the important motivation why people go to higher roles. So how do they know I can safely make there's always an element of risk. How do they know if they especially it's mostly on the company context, right? If there's a very political company, because those are companies like that, very political, or like your boss is not a design expert. They're from like CPO, who is came from sales. He has no idea technical. He can't really grade you. You know what I mean? So in that context, what is the best way? How do someone reflect at what level they are?
Yeah, that's a very difficult situation. And I'm trying to think of ways that maybe in cases where you don't have a clear structure, if the company is flexible enough and if they trust you, because at the end of the day, everything comes back to trust. How much would that company trust you? If there's a high level of trust and they really rely on you to get the job done and get it done to the highest level possible, maybe what you can do is you can come back and suggest a structure and suggest the same as if you go and you have a chat with the engineering team or the development team, they have structures. They know their developers need to advance from this level to that level by knowing how to handle a very specific process or language or a system. So
Mm.
maybe what you do is you go and you try to influence and create a track for yourself, right? And this goes back to that conversation with your manager. So even if you're managed by somebody that doesn't know design, it doesn't understand, they understand structure. And if you come back and you suggest one and you say, I'm suggesting we create this, and if I do these two things, I can move on to the next level. Maybe that's something you can put in place, and maybe they can help you and they can be your supportive, right? When it comes to that conversation with management. But at the same time, maybe they're not open to do that. And maybe, like you said, you do a really good job, you're consistent, and nobody's interested in promoting you because they want you to do that same thing over and over again because you're so good at it. And in that case, companies like that, you have to ask yourself that question: Am I happy? Do I still enjoy this? So you go back to that same way of self-assessing. And if there's nothing you can do and you can't influence, yes, maybe it's time you seek something
Mm.
else, right? And you move on. And that's the only way I can think of you can manage that situation. And to be honest, I'm sure there's probably more ways to do this, but it really depends on that context.
So we're coming to the ending of the episode. Moving on. So as you progress in your career, as you shift like companies, I'm expecting, so especially Gen Z and millennials, late millennials, I don't think so we would be staying in company like for so long. Companies are coming and going and so much is changing. So as you progress in your career, you be in different environments, right? Some environments are great, some environments are great learning opportunities, some environments are completely opposite, straight down toxic. You know what I mean? That is the reality. You don't know until you go in. No one is going to, you can ask the recruiter, no one is going to reveal actual truth. No one wants to put a bad name. So, what are the flags? Like, tell me 3 or 5 flags when you start a job and you've been there, when to know you have to move on to a different role for your own peace of mind or for your own like progression.
We go back to that question you ask yourself, or maybe that feeling you have on a Sunday evening. Are you excited? Are you anxious? How would you describe that feeling when you think of it's Monday morning? I'll be in work
Mm,
at my clock or whatever time you have to be in. So
that's the flag one.
that's the number one. Try and assess how do you feel about going to work tomorrow. And that will give you your first red flag. If from there on, I would say if that's a very strong, either positive or negative, everything else probably just falls into place quite quickly. If you're not sure, maybe the next thing you can do, you can just ask yourself, what do I want to do to stay interested, to be curious, to explore? In some cases, you might realize that the job is good, it pays well, you're happy enough. You might not be the happiest. Maybe, like you said, maybe there's a bit of company politics or things you don't agree with or you don't enjoy. But there might be no good reason for you to just move on, right?
Yeah,
Because in cases, even though you might think the grass is greener on the other side of the
it's
fence,
not.
it's probably not. It's probably some similar situation or maybe some kind of context that maybe just repeats to some extent.
Mm.
I think in some cases, what you need to ask yourself is first identify how you feel and then try and find ways to improve that feeling. So it could be that you just take an extra project that could be outside the work. It could mean that you mentor people. It could mean that you just simply do your own personal project and you somehow feel the void or feel that missing or the gap that you feel in between your work and the kind of things that make you happy. I think there's probably ways to deal with that. It might be just creating a podcast, apply the same principles you apply to get that first job or progress to your second job or get that senior or higher seniority level and apply the same principles. Try and do those things. Go to conferences, go to meetups. We're repeating the same things we said before, right? But those
Mm.
things are still valid. They still apply. Is how do you progress on your own? How do you engage and keep curious, and so on. So I guess that's probably a good tip and a good thing is just Sunday evenings, monitor how you feel about tomorrow, about Monday. And if you're not sure, then try and take some new projects, maybe on a side hustle type thing or a side project, or work with friends, or go to a meetup and just have a conversation with people and see what makes you happy, what gets you excited, what fires that flame and gets you in that creative streak if you want.
So basically, they're not like five red flags. There is only one major red flag that indicates, like, how far the color is in green, yellow, or red. If it is red, then you have obvious answer. There are no more checks. Try your best, start looking somewhere. If it is yellow, green, happy days. Yellow meaning like, okay, how do I fill the void? So yeah, I think this is a very good conversation about career and progression. What would be your key takeaways? Let's put it into two buckets. One is from junior to like senior level, and from senior to director level, like someone at very high level. What would be the key takeaways for both of them?
Okay, so for let's say graduates to junior, I would say just be curious and master the, if you can, as much as you can, of the basic skills. Focus on good visual presentation, and if you struggle, just seek advice in terms of what's simple, what's clean, what's really sending a message of I'm organized, I know what I'm saying, the main point is, and try and focus on presentation, how you present yourself and how you present the work you do. And that's very important. That's the kind of things that will get you interviews to a higher level, right? And will help you progress. And of course, it's still the work of your portfolio. Your portfolio does a lot of talking for you, and also a good portfolio will get you the job as well. And of course, there's more to it because there's a career or an interview process for a reason. You can't just rely on your CV and portfolio, but there's a good part of it in that section. So make sure those are vetted by industry veterans. Make sure you talk to people. Make sure you talk to senior people. You seek advice and you ask them, "What can I do to get better? How can I take this to the next level?" And plenty of people will help you with that. So master the basics, make sure your visual presentation is strong, and also just rehearse and keep at it. It might take months, it might take years. You have to keep at it, right? And you have to find ways to sustain yourself in the meantime. So that's the graduate junior level.
Mm.
For senior level, how do you progress? You definitely ask yourself, how do I feel about this? Do I have a good feeling? Am I still excited? Am I curious? Am I learning things? Is the is there a possibility I can do this better or faster or really up to quality? Well, ask yourself these questions. And if you do this and you still keep learning and you keep building your skills, and probably again, we're not mentioning tools, we're mentioning skills, then you will become better and specialize, right? And become a specialist in something, right? So find the kind of thing that gets you excited and stick to it. And then layer on top of that and add other things, other side or other skills, and layering and keep at it and progress. And that's probably a nice way to produce or create a feedback loop where you keep learning and you keep asking yourself, am I happy? Do I still enjoy it? Is this still good for me? Will I do this for free? And if the answer is yes, I'll definitely do it for free, then it's good. Try and get paid for it, but ask yourself that question and see if the answer is yes.
So yeah, I think those are like very good takeaways. So thank you so much, Radu, and have a nice day.
And you too. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for having me.
Thank you.